Yesterday, a shaft of light cut into the darkness. Negotiations were concluded in Moscow on a treaty to ban all nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater.
On July 26, 1963, the nation watched as President John F. Kennedy delivered his address on the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Such a momentous feat in diplomacy, as well as changes in public perception and scientific research, came about due to one relatively unknown movement, the St. Louis Baby Tooth Project. In the 1950s, the Cold War had both the US and USSR vying for nuclear supremacy. Flocks of people sought to view US nuclear tests. This so-called atomic tourism surged on April 22, 1952, when over 30 million people from the safety of their homes watched the first television broadcast of a nuclear explosion. At the time, science and the public were two separate spheres. Science was concentrated among scholars, and information rarely trickled down to the general population. A group dedicated to addressing these issues was the Committee for Nuclear Information, or CNI. Founded in April 1958 in St. Louis, Missouri, the CNI promoted information about radioactivity. Individual explosions were known to cause health effects in their blast radius, but CNI founders wondered whether radiation spread further. No evidence existed to prove or disprove this, so the CNI pressed for a new study. Around this time, Dr. Hermann M. Kalkar found that strontium-90, a radioactive byproduct of testing, accumulated in the same ratio as calcium. He suggested that since children absorb calcium at high rates, their baby teeth would also accumulate strontium-90. Baby teeth could be easily collected. If many contain nuclear residue, then widespread radiation accumulation would be proved. With the method found, the question lay in where to start a study. Most US nuclear testing was done in the Southwest. However, winds brought much of the radioactive material to the Midwest, contaminating dairy through hay and grass. A preliminary survey by the US Public Health Service found that St. Louis produced milk had record high levels of strontium-90, making the city ideal for a new study. The St. Louis Baby Tooth Project was initiated in December 1958, led by physician Dr. Louis Rees and biologist Barry Commoner. The CNI were the public face of the operation. They enlisted volunteers who collected teeth from schools, libraries, and other organizations. Hundreds of thousands were collected, so much so that St. Louis Mayor Raymond Tucker proclaimed a Tooth Survey Week in 1960. The project quickly became a national movement, with other cities issuing their own tooth collection surveys. Every kid received a participation button.
What? You would wear your button. You know, it was like you wanted that bad.
Miss Nina Seavey, a participant in the study, describes her experience donating her teeth to the survey.
You felt like you were involved in something important and that you were involved in science. And that was super amazing.
By 1970, over 320,000 teeth were collected. Each tooth was packaged in envelopes and sent to the Washington University School of Dentistry, where a special research team would look for strontium-90 content. They concluded that from 1945 to 1965, strontium-90 levels in the baby teeth of children had increased 50-fold, in correlation with nuclear tests. For the first time, high amounts of radiation were found over long distances and decades of accumulation. While the Baby Tooth Project made astounding revelations, it faced opposition from many. With the Soviets increasing their testing and technological programs, many associated a US response with a Cold War arms race victory. Even amongst scientists, the idea of banning nuclear testing seemed counterintuitive to patriotism. A 1958 debate between Nobel Prize winner Linus Pauling and fellow physicist Edward Teller displayed this disparity.
If we stay strong and if we continue to be sure of ourselves and know and let the Russians know that we will defend ourselves, I think that is the best way to peace. But all this means that we must be prepared.
Despite this opposition, a growing number were taken aback by the Baby Tooth Project's findings. Change was imminent.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
President Kennedy campaigned against nuclear testing, but switched policy due to increased Soviet testing. Nevertheless, he pursued negotiations to minimize nuclear fallout impacting future generations. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis provided the opportunity for such negotiations. Both sides also adopted the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, which discouraged the possibility of nuclear war. Simultaneously, the Baby Tooth Project emphasized that radiation amounts across the US were accumulating fast. The study's initial results were given to President Kennedy by a scientific advisor. The president contacted Dr. Louis Rees and used the project evidence as impetus for the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Overground nuclear testing was now banned in the US, UK, and USSR. The Baby Tooth Project marked a change in Cold War relations. At the Cold War's onset, the US and USSR were focused on military buildup. This was replaced by a greater emphasis on environmental concerns following the Baby Tooth Project's findings, using politics as a tool to better humanity.
But the achievement of this goal is not a victory for one side. It is a victory for mankind.
The Baby Tooth Project also influenced public perception. It and the CNI aimed to provide citizens with accurate information about the dangers of nuclear weapons. People no longer felt isolated from radiation effects. In the context of environmental movements, they were willing to question their connection between patriotism and nuclear testing. Scientific research practices were also affected by the Baby Tooth Project. The CNI issued pamphlets detailing the study's work. Dr. Barry Commoner and other Washington University scientists increasingly voiced their findings in public articles. This resulted in the scientific community taking a larger role in societal issues. People reacted to scientific ideas, and the public, rather than scholars, became the face of scientific advancement. Following a crowd is easy, to turn against it is hard, but redirecting the entire crowd is the hardest. The Baby Tooth Project demonstrated the latter by transforming citizen science advocacy, changing public perception of nuclear weapons, and leading to test ban treaties. Who knew that baby teeth could beat bombs?